Longtime college football coach, former Baylor defensive coordinator Phil Bennett, now with some true serum coming your way and our way on 365 Sports. Phil, thank you very much. So how much as a coach on staff can be accomplished? And you hear about the improvement from game one to maybe game two after you've played somebody. But what about during an off week? What do you work on during an off week? What is the protocol in your opinion?
Well, I've said this before. The thing that I've always done is you play 6 games and evaluate what you've done good, what you've done poorly, and you evaluate your players. What's your best combination? Who deserves to play? I think you look offensively, since that's a big issue, and say, these are the things we're capable of doing. This is what Blake can do. This is what we can do with our running game. There's a lot of things that you take from your statistics and said, these statistics won't lie. These are the things working for you. Now, the other thing, then packages. What's our best package? How can we get better? One of the things I know defensively, I talked to a guy that was friends with one of the guys on staff, is they want to know what can they do better on first down. First down's such a big down defensively. If you let a team get second and short, second and medium, your chances of stopping them become very hard. And so those are the things you do. You evaluate yourself, and then you go out and you start working those things.
Phil, what if you can't figure out what you do well?
Well, Paul, there's things they've done well. Mm-hmm. Every game has its, obviously the negatives sometimes outweigh the positives, but you see some things, and you even go back and you say, listen, this is where I know back when, and I always reflect to 2012 because we had to create some things. Mm-hmm. We said, you know what? These are what people are doing to us. We can't seem to do this the right way. Let's get some answers here. And I think that's one of the things that both sides of the ball will do and go out and practice it against each other. Now, the other thing is it a toughness issue. One of the players, I think it was Baldwin, thought that, that they didn't think everybody was in. The mind's a powerful thing. If you challenge them mentally and physically, you can change habits. You really can. And I think I've said this before, I think there's winnable games out there that this thing can flip, but it's got to be done right.
Coach, elsewhere in the Big 12, Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State seem to be getting on track after a bit of a rocky start. Just in your experience, what is it like to prepare for a Mike Gundy team? And just what are your thoughts on him and just the longevity and consistency he's had in Stillwater, and any surprise that they're starting to get their groove as they settle in on their backfield?
I think Mike is one of those guys, you don't be at a place. How many years has it been? 19, 20 years.
Yeah.
This is how old I am. I was the DC at Iowa State when Mike was a freshman starter at Oklahoma State. Now, how about that?
Yeah.
But the reason he's still there is he's got a really good staff. They like it there. They stick together. He's hired some good coaches. It hasn't been by chance. And you just mentioned, when they lost to South Alabama, my goodness. Everybody was ready to run over them. And then lo and behold, Kansas goes in there. Actually, it was Kansas State, and then Kansas, and they take care of both of them and play very well. And I'm going to give you another flip. Last week, Tech left Waco sky high. Mm-hmm. And then they ran into a freshman quarterback, and I would think that Jolie's a little bit scratching his head right now, too.
Phil, when you mentioned Gundy, the longevity and how people were angry even last year because the expectations were still high, and then how they started, isn't sometimes all the most difficult ADs, whoever, to not fire somebody and let it work itself out? Or what's the fine line there?
Well, you and I have talked about this. The ADs that really have a communication line with the coaches. One of the things that I always thought about great ADs, a guy named Joe Dean at LSU, he wanted to know your plan. And I'm sure Mac's like this, and I'm sure the AD at Oklahoma State, he might tell them, this year it might be a journey for us to take time to take off on this. This is what we're looking at. Now, it always changes, and it can be variable, but you're having your AD aware of your situation is invaluable. And you have to be careful not to overstate the positives or understate the negatives, because you got to be truthful. Because your AD didn't want to hear you. Ain't listen. We might start off on this schedule a little bit rough, but we're going to come out of it. I think it takes an AD that has a vision, has a belief that sticks with the people. I always go back to Frank Beamer. Frank Beamer had some rough years, had a couple good years and a couple of rough years. And then this guy, I remember the AD that came out and said it. He goes, I just always knew that we would get this thing straightened out. And it paid off. Now, sometimes it's a fine line. Do you stay, they've got a situation here at A&M. Do you stay 6 years? What's the timeline? I don't know. But because you have to be in that circle, and those guys got to have a feel for that, and they got to see how it's run every day. How the players, you might have to make, unfortunately, we all know this, you got to make coaching staff changes sometimes to improve yourself. And we all hate it. Hell, I've been a part of it, good and bad. So that's always the things that you look at.
Phil, that Oregon-Washington game was one of the most fun games I've ever watched in my life. You mentioned A&M. They're paralyzed. Jimbo Fisher's a little paralyzed by being too conservative, right? He's kind of going off the old script a little bit too much. Dan Lanning does not have that problem.
I want to tell you something. I'm a huge Dan Lanning fan. I knew him when he was a young GA at Pitt. I've known him, but actually texted with him last week. The thing that I look at Dan, and I know after the game he immediately took responsibility. He really thought on that fourth down, because I'm going to tell you, sometimes you have to make a stop and you have to make a play. I looked at situations, with Art. We always went for it on fourth down. I never worried about it because I knew the decision was made. But there's no doubt Art would have went for it, because he wanted to win the game on offense. And they had moved the ball defensively quite a bit on Oregon. And he said, you know what? If we can make this first down, the game's over. And it didn't happen for him.
Coach, Paul brought up A&M. Your thoughts after the latest, I guess, head-scratcher and disappointment against Tennessee, and just where they find themselves now, as you know, the Sharks circling there in the waters near College Station?
Well, I've said this from the get-go. The SEC right now, Craig, is not just a top-to-bottom great league. There's some good teams in it, but there's no, there's not a Georgia. Alabama's not Alabama. Tennessee was a very beatable team for the Aggies. Very beatable. Their quarterback is very average. Their running game is excellent, which helped them win the game. Georgia's is beatable. Florida, all those guys, Auburn, it's sort of a down. This would have been a great year for the Aggies to step up. And I'm not saying it's over, because they could win out, because I think everybody in this league's average. They just can't seem. Their second half on offense has really, the last two games, I think they've scored 6 points. And you're not going to win doing that. They come out fine. I think that, everybody's down on their O-line. I'm just not willing to say that I believe they're good coaches. I just don't see them having the explosion players to be, they don't have a great running back. Their receivers are okay. Tight ends okay. They're just not explosive on offense. Defensively, they're good in the front end and not as good in the back end. So it's sort of, what they're getting. They're playing close, but they just can't finish.
You coached at Oklahoma. You've coached at LSU. You've coached at A&M, and among others in the country. Which program, and I know you were the head coach at SMU, which program had the most intensity or pressures from donors?
Well, I keep saying, well, I got to quit that. But, what I see is this. I see LSU has been a championship program. Oklahoma has been a championship program. Their expectancies are real and they're high. A&M, per se, the last championship they won was 1998. The donors are avid, they're dedicated, they're loyal, and they want to be good. They have the best stadium, the best facilities in America. And I talk to them. I know most of them. They're scratching their heads. Why can't we do that? Why can't we do what Washington's doing? Why can't we do what LSU did in 2019? Why can't we do what TCU did a year ago? Get to that game. And so I would have to say the Aggies.
Phil Bennett, former Baylor defensive coordinator, longtime college football coach with us on 365 Sports.
Phil, how much are the Aggies going to be affected by the fact that Texas is coming in next year? That is the reason they left the Big 12 was to get away from Texas. They're still in the fight song, all those things, and they're coming back in. And pretty much every decision that A&M has ever made when it comes to football has to do with the boys down in Austin.
I love, and I say this, the rivalry between A&M and Texas. I respect the rivalry between A&M and Texas. The younger generation, I'm almost 70 years old, so obviously I'm old. But the days, I've probably been involved with more A&M Texas games, playing and coaching than anybody around other than maybe RC and a few others. It is a great, great rivalry. And believe it or not, among the people that are involved, the respect is immense. DeLoss at that time with a conference and new things irritated a lot of Aggies, and the younger group said, we're going to get out of there. We want to get away from them. We want to get I think it's outstanding. I think that what's fixing to happen next year, the last game of the year is going to be Texas and A&M at College Station. And hopefully I'm around. I would not miss it for the world. I think it's great for Texas. I think it's great for college football. And I just think it was one of those things. And I'd like y'all to answer that. It's one of those things that had to be. It had to come back. If we were ever going to make this thing right, that rivalry had to come back.
Yeah, sometimes running away from your problems is not the way to face them, right? No. And so now it's like there's no way out of this now. Nobody's leaving the SEC, so you're going to face each other and going to make the best of it. And now I think some of the back and forth about recruiting and all the other things will finally make sense again. As
absolutely,
for the last decade plus, it's just been petty and silly.
Well, and let's be honest with it. Two great state universities, that are 85 miles apart. My goodness. I mean, it's a natural. And it's, to me, it gets me motivated and wanting us, being an A&M guy, wanting us, to test our mettle. We had a run on them there and to continue that.
Coach, you saw some of the newcomers into the Big 12, West Virginia and TCU, and now we're seeing these 4 new schools, and then there'll be another 4 next year. But the 4 new schools that are coming from outside the Power 5, having a little bit of this adjustment period. When you saw the new schools come in like TCU, West Virginia, and you see these new schools this year, what are like the biggest adjustments that you have to overcome or deal with as far as making that transition? And what do you see from maybe some of the 4 that are dealing with those types of deals?
Craig, you're playing better teams week after week. There's no slip games for you that you can just slip by. There's no slip games. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember it, but my first game ever at Baylor was TCU's first ever Big 12 conference game.
Mm-hmm.
And they had I think, David, you correct me, 17-game winning streak. Is that right?
Yep.
Or something like that.
They had gone undefeated the year before, won the Rose Bowl. Wasn't that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I think they had beaten us, 62-10 the year before in Fort Worth, and it flipped. So, I mean, it's just week after week. Now they did a good job. I'm not saying that, but I tell this story all the time. After we won it in 13, I get a call. I'm at my house in College Station, and it's Gary Patterson. He goes, "Hey, just want to tell you congratulations." He said, "Man," he said, I don't know. He said, "When you went there, I knew you'd get better on defense and you'd help them." And he goes, I find it hard to believe. And he even said this, that with y'all's offense, that y'all could play good defense to win it. He said, "What do you think the answer was?" And I told him, I said, "You had to change your philosophy." And I did. And lo and behold, he makes a change and goes to the exact thing we're doing and becomes a different, the next year, it's, what was the score? 61-58 or whatever it was.
Yep.
And
don't take those calls,
teams, Phil. Yeah. Well, those things, you look at last week, great example was Iowa State playing at Cincinnati. Iowa State, some people say, oh, they're a lower level Big 12. Iowa State, people that have played Iowa State that really know them, every week they'll tell you, you better button up. Cincinnati didn't know that. UCF, going to Kansas, couldn't play with them. UCF going to Kansas State, couldn't play with them. So there's going to be some transition. BYU going to TCU, couldn't hang with them. So they're going to have to step up their recruiting and what they're doing to match. The Big 12 is an underappreciated league, and I think people are seeing that.
Phil, if you don't mind, one more question. I shared the interview Mac Rhodes with us last week on Tuesday. He's incredibly available, accessible, transparent. And he had mentioned that he had conversations with Dave Aranda. A lot of people looked at that and like, my God, is he also in the film room? He's not. But your thoughts about when you first heard it and then when you listen, or when you first heard about it and then when you listen, what in the end did you come out of that with?
Well, first of all, the first thing that I didn't like the fact that he was talking offense with Dave, because he doesn't have the knowledge of offense. He's a fan. Now he's a knowledgeable fan, and he's a personnel guy. I've in my 44 years, I've never ever had an AD talk to any of our coaches about schemes. The more I read it, what you gave me, it's a different take. He was talking about things when it's personnel, when it's talk about it. I like the interchange, and I do. I believe he has great confidence in Dave. And I think you have to be careful. Assistant coaches, their families, we're used to being talked about, but not from the AD. I would just think that sometimes less is more. I would say I was hoping if something was said, it would be a little bit more to turn. We're evaluating everything. And I think when you particularly say the offense is being addressed, you're sort of going into a land that I don't like as a coach. And I'll be honest, I like Mac Rhodes. I like him a lot. But I would tell him the same thing. But the more I read it, it wasn't as bad, or heard it, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
If you took Georgia, Washington, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Michigan, and of course Ohio State's playing Penn State, who would you say right now, based on what you've seen, the eye test, are the four best teams in the country?
Man, I would tell you, right now, I'm in Washington as a scorer. They're exciting. They're a scoring machine. Michigan is, maybe two Big Ten teams, along with Oklahoma. I'm not sure. I watched the Georgia, Daryl Dickey as an analyst at Georgia, good friend of mine, great coach. And I watched that game because I'm watching Georgia with interest. Vanderbilt played them tough. I just think that once you get to the end, they're probably those teams that you said are all in there. But Washington is dynamic. They remind me of us at Baylor in on offense, 13, 14, 15. I mean, every play, you better hold your breath. And you know what's interesting now? I'm going to tell you something. I told somebody when I was at Kansas State, we lost a very close game to OU the year they won the national championship. And our whole goal was to come back and say we want them in Kansas City. And we played them for the Big 12 championship. And it was another great game. And I think they beat us 24-22. This Texas OU potential matchup at the end could be something.
Phil, as a Florida State alum who had to play that Oklahoma team in that national championship year, makes me really sad you didn't win either of those games because they were absolutely the team of destiny that year. Oklahoma was.
I think you're exactly right. I remember this. A bunch of Oklahoma coaches called me. I'm watching that game going, wow. I think the score, you correct me, 13-3, wasn't that right?
13-2.
13-2.
Yep.
And they were partying. I was still up, and I was in Manhattan, Kansas, and I'm not going to say who it was, but they said, hey, just want to let you know, we're thinking about you. He said, y'all were the best team we played. So it gave me some comfort at Kansas State.
Shit, that hurt, Phil.
Well, and you know what? Seth used to tell me. He said their whole team said it today. Kansas State was the second best team we played.
Yeah, man. Those were some great games. You eventually got OU in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, we did.
Snyder did, yeah.
Yeah. We put a little Darren Sproles on them.
Yeah. little running back voodoo, so to speak. Hey, Phil, as always, great to hear from you there. The chat room loves what you do and loves your truth serum and also your knowledge and experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Phil Bennett with us every Monday in the 5 o'clock hour. It has been fantastic to have him on as much as we do.